Derek Chauvin's trial continues in Minneapolis, I believe, in Minnesota. He is the police officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, resulting in George Floyd's death. But his defense is claiming otherwise. They're resting on a few things, that there was fentanyl in George Floyd's system when he passed away, and they're claiming he resisted arrest, which is obvious that he didn't if you watched the video. And now their other claim that the defense is making, the officers, they were so distracted. Chauvin was too distracted to know that he shouldn't have dug his knee with his hands in his pockets into the neck of a man who said, "I can't breathe," 27 times before dying, and continued to kneel on his neck for at least 3 minutes after he was no longer breathing and an officer said, "I can't find a pulse." Let's listen to what his defense has to say, though.
There are people across the street. There are cars stopping, people yelling. There is a growing crowd and what officers perceive to be a threat. They're called names. Heard them this morning. A fucking bum. They're screaming at him, causing the officers to divert their attention from the care of Mr. Floyd to the threat that was growing in front of them.
The care of Mr. Floyd. Curious phrasing. The care of Mr. Floyd. Now, you have to wonder, why were people stopping to watch? Do they stop just because they wanted to see someone arrest somebody else? I mean, there is rubbernecking involved in general, but they stopped because they saw a man dying in front of them. So basically the case is currently being made by Chauvin's defense team that the officer was too distracted by the commotion that he caused by kneeling on a man's neck for over 9 minutes because people were saying, "Stop it. Please get off of him. Please don't kill him." And then they're going to turn around and use the effects of the murder in order to excuse the murder. Now, you know, this is, I guess, what every defense attorney has to do. They have to provide the best case for their client, but it doesn't make it any less infuriating. And just an aside, I don't know that attorney's name, but a lot of what lawyers do, and Sam has talked about this a few times, they justify working on behalf of clients in order to say everybody deserves a defense, etc. That's how a lot of corporate attorneys justify representing ExxonMobil or Goldman Sachs or whatever reprehensible company that they choose to take a fat fee from. But how do you actually stomach representing Derek Chauvin in this case? It could not be more clear that the kneeling on the neck of a man resulted in his death. The suffocating of him, the "I can't breathe" 27 times, those were his final words. George Floyd also cried out for his mother and said that his stomach hurt. But his final words were that he was unable to breathe. And then the officer that was helping one of the other 3 officers who were pushing down on George Floyd and making sure he couldn't stand up as he was being suffocated, couldn't find a pulse. Chauvin still knelt on him, still knelt on his neck, as the gurney approached a dead George Floyd. Chauvin was still kneeling on his neck.
Chauvin, again, had about a complaint a year for just under 20 years. So you wonder, were crowds involved in all of those too, making him lose his focus? Is this like the PGA Tour where you have to be completely silent as the cop does his work? I mean, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of the PGA Tour in Georgia, as they pass those horrific anti-voting bills, there's not a rule that you can't make noise when Derek Chauvin's doing his backswing, aka kneeling on a man's neck. So look, the reason we're covering this is because these kinds of arguments have worked in the past. Many more times, I should say, than the prosecution's arguments have worked when they're going after police officers. Oftentimes because the prosecution doesn't care that much because they're all part of the same team. I'm really hoping that given the severity of what Derek Chauvin did, that this will be an exception to that rule.